Hello everybody, we're back. Hoping that you like what I've got to say, and don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and let's get into it. History of vampires. So how did I come into this subject? I got curious. I had a book that I started reading, and it was by a Catholic priest, also a man of letters, in the early 1800s, turn of the century, up until I think he died right before World War II. He wrote on the topic of demons and vampires, basically how to recognize vampires, what to do, and so forth. And he had written this book. I will link that down below. His name is Monteque. It just kept leading me down these rabbit holes of research, more books and books. And I started tracing things back and realizing the lore of the vampire goes so far back, where this whole archetype of the vampire, where this comes from. And I just have lots of questions. And whenever I have questions, being an academic, I have to start digging. And so that just always takes me farther and farther and farther. So we want to start with, how did we as a culture, as an existence of people, come to create these monsters? Where do monsters come from? Well, fear. Fear is a basic level emotion that we all have. Now, fear creates a biochemical, high emotional response. It's intended to keep us safe from physical harm or psychological threats. These dangers could be real or they could be imagined. There are collective fears within a society, and those change over time, something that we'll probably talk about and get into at another time. So in ancient culture and tradition, stories were told that contained like boogeymen, or they'd sometimes call them bugbear. And these were meant to keep children or even adults well behaved or safe. And if you think of Grimm fairy tales in their original, not the Disneyed versions of those fairy tales, but they're very dark, and the lessons and the morals that are in them, it's to keep them safe. So where did the vampire archetype come from? How do we get from ancient stories to the modern day Eric the Northman or Damon Salvatore, or of course Lestat de Liancourt? The original monster that can be tied to the modern day vampire is called the Lamia. The first mentions of this creature are early, like Mesopotamia. So we're talking about 475 to 450 BC. There's art that portrays a child attacking demoness, a woman with a lion's head clutching a snake in each hand, and then often has rampant animals on either side. Rampant meaning, kind of up like this. And if the artwork or any written story at that point, you have to understand that through oral tradition, these stories probably originated long before that. This is very, very early, this creature. Then we sort of skip forward. We get mentioned in a story, Doris of Samos, and this is in 280 BC, tells the story of a beautiful woman named Lamia, of course, whom Zeus had relations with. Well, if you know anything about mythology, this is a pretty common thing. Zeus just can't, he just can't keep it in his drawer, so he's always coming down and messing around with the females and pissing Hera off. So, as you would expect, Hera's pissed, and in her anger and jealousy, she destroys her children. Through grief, she is disfigured into this creature, and in her jealousy, she kills the children of others. When we go forward, then we get another account similar. This is by Aristophanes, and he adds that Hera also cursed Lamia to grieve day and night. She had with insomnia, she couldn't sleep, and Zeus felt sorry for her and gave her the ability to pluck her eyes out so that she would be able to sleep. Then we get to 30 BC, and Diodorus has an account where he talks about, it's sort of removing the mythology, and what he states can really be applied to, well, anyone. There's no supernatural elements to what he's discussing. Instead, he talks about a beautiful queen. Her name is Lamia, and over time she became ugly and beast-like because her children that were born died. She envied the fertility of other women, and so ordered her men to go and kill all of the babies. This queen is so heartbroken over the fact that she can't have children and jealous of the women around her that do, that she orders them to be killed. It wouldn't be the first time in history that there would have been a mass infanticide. So, we could see that possibly taking place. It's an interesting take on it, but here we're still discussing one person. It is mentioned in the first mythology story that Lamia is the queen of Libya. So the area in which we're talking about is in that region. And you'll find that these stories correlate with that particular area of the continent. So next we get the instance where now we're going to switch. Instead of just one woman named Lamia, that this monster, this creature is mentioned, we get multiple. And that is where Hesychius in 500 AD speaks of a beast of a woman of the name Lamia, and also talks of an apparition, meaning something that's not corporeal, phantasma, also mentions a gluttonous people, and also a fish. Then we get an account in 630 AD. Isidore tells stories where they, meaning the Lamia, snatched up babies and tore them apart. So these are stories of vengeful ghosts. So vengeful being important in this as we go through this story, that devour children. It also mentions shape-shifting and a serpentine nature. So if any of you have heard of a Lamia, or in monster manuals or other stories and types, they're often depicted as snake-like. This is where that happens. So we've gone from Queen of Libya, who Zeus came down and slept with, to this sort of moving through time, and now we're talking about these women. We still have the tie-in, the infanticide, where they're vengeful, grieving, killing infants, and now snake-like. So how do we get there? That is where there is an account in 92 AD where Corybus slays a baby-devouring Lamia that was sent by Apollo against Argos. And it's taken from Statius's Theban epic. So there's a tale here. We're talking about an epic story, mythology related, where Apollo is a character in this, and the story of the killing of the Lamia. So it's a little bit of a long story. The TLDR version here is that we have a fully described monster in an epic tale. It's the first clear example that we have of a baby devourer. Okay, so we're not just killing babies now and we're eating them. Ew. As opposed to just destroying or killing the offspring. This monster is the result of a young woman, innocent, and was deflowered. Nice way of putting it, isn't it? Deflowered by Apollo. He rapes her over by the river or something in the story. She becomes pregnant. She can't tell her father. She knows that he'll shun her. He won't forgive the fact that it was from rape. She goes off into the wilderness, takes care of the sheep and so forth, has the child out there, and one day while she's hiding the child to nap while she's working, the dogs or whatever come and tear it apart. In her grief, she, tears her clothes, bears her brush. She goes into town. She confesses everything to her father. He shuns her, says she must die. With her betrayal and pain, she becomes a monster with the face and the breast of a woman, and then a snake head, and the rest of her body is snake-like. Then she goes through and her torment, snatches babies, and eats them. Fully fledged story where we're getting, the baby being killed, her grieving, vengeful, turns into monster, snake-like. All of the components sort of come together with this story. The only thing we're missing is Queen of Libya and all that, but that was kind of before. But again, the gods are involved and they're always just messing stuff up for people. So then we get next a shift. Now we've got this snake creature that is attributed to this whole thing, and that sort of shifts into the seduction. The monster is seducing rather than we get rid of this whole baby eating thing. Now we're going to go into the eating of men, and to lure them, it's a seduction. So this is an interesting sort of switch that we get. In 100 AD, in the orations written by Dio Chrysostom, there's a creature that occurred in Libya. So now we're getting back to Libya, talking about that area. It's all coming together. And it was a composite creature of unrelated animal parts. It was said to hunt animals, wild animals like leopards, lions, wild asses, sheep, deer, but its favorite was men. Now when it hunted leopards and lions, it hunted them as an animal would hunt another animal. But when it came to men, it would lure them in with its seductive ways because it had the beautiful porcelain-like face and breast of a gorgeous woman that it states no painter or sculptor could ever reproduce. And then the head of a snake and the body of a snake. And that looking into their eyes, they would immediately fall into lust with them. Not love, lust. So immediately wanting to, get down. So main elements to note, the name Lamia comes from the single woman, Libyan queen. She was wronged by the gods to suffer, becomes vengeful, and does harm to children, becomes a hideous creature and beast. Then the story morphs to a group of vengeful creatures that eat babies. First account of where we get flesh, blood being consumed, and description includes the reptilian features, and at that point still harming out of vengeance. Then we get to the story that includes a single woman with these elements, the body of a beast brought to a tragic tale by the sleeping, with the God interfering, the loss of the child through horrific means, and then becoming a rampaging baby-eating monster. Then the creature that we talk about after that is hunts by seduction young men and eats them. All right, so that is the beginnings of this whole concept, the first monster that we can tie to the modern day blood-consuming creature of the night. Right now we're talking about ancient Mesopotamia and Greek mythology and all of that. And so we're hanging out in Libya. And next time we will talk a little bit more. We're going to get into gorgons. If you don't know what those are, then you should look them up. I'm sure you'll be familiar with it when we talk about it. And don't forget to like and subscribe down at the bottom. Click that button, click the notification bell so that you can be, one of the first to know when a video goes up. And thanks for coming by. I hope you guys enjoyed everything. Leave me some comments, ask me some questions, give me some resources if you know stuff and you want to share. By all means, bring it to the group. And I'll see you guys later on. Thanks for stopping by.